Okay, item 7B, presentation of street system survey results by IMS Infrastructure Management Services. Steve?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, Steve Arent, Director of Street and Stormwater. I have two other gentlemen with me tonight I'd like to introduce. We have Zac Thomason. Zac's with Infrastructure and Management Services. He's a national service manager. And we also have Clint Myers, who's an engineering tech for street and stormwater. Clint was started out the beginning of this project and finished it, and did an awful good job. I want to take a few minutes to review some of the decisions that were made that led up to tonight. If you'll remember, back in November 2015, we went to the voters, and they approved the Vision 2025 sales tax extension. That was very significant, as we all well know. And then on October 6th, 2015, we also brought to the council, asked for your approval for a professional service contract with Infrastructure IMS. And that's led up to tonight, and Zac will do a presentation on the results of that survey that we did for our streets and also signage of the streets. So with that, I'll introduce Zac.
Thank you, Steve. Mr. Mayor, Council, I certainly thank you for having me here tonight. And tonight I'm going to be reviewing the 2016 State of the Roadway Network here in Broken Arrow. Let's first take a look at the scale of investment. The city maintains approximately 508 centerline miles of road, which equates to roughly just under 9 million square yards of pavement. That makes the pavements the single largest asset that the city owns and maintains, valued at $1.13 million per mile, or a total aggregate for just a tad over $500 million. This is a very large asset that the city maintains. And if we take an early look at the condition score, the network average PCI score is a 70. PCI is a pavement condition index that ranks the health of a road on a 0 to 100 scale. 0 is absolutely bad. 100 is a perfectly brand new road that was paved yesterday. So 70 is a very, very good number. Your backlog is at 4%. Backlog is the big ticket work that needs to be done by the city. It's the full reconstruction candidates. It's the partial reconstruction candidates. It's the expensive rehab. 4% is a very financially healthy number. Generally, a financially healthy city will have less than 10% of their network fall in the backlog category. You folks are well below that, and certainly in a strong position to manage the network. And we'll get into some of the finer details in the next few slides. So why do pavement management? The concept of pavement management is actually very simple. It's far more cost effective to maintain an asset over its life than it is to let it deteriorate and rebuild it later. So as we can see in this chart here, in the first 40% of a pavement's life, there's only a 15% drop in quality. But in the next 15% of that pavement's life, there's a 40% drop in quality. And that's that so-called cliff that you see there. So it's far more cost effective to maintain an asset in good condition and spend $1 now than it is to let it deteriorate and rebuild it later and spend $8 later. Streets are very similar to the cars that we drive on an annual basis. We buy a car, we change the oil, and we do routine maintenance in an effort to maximize the life of the vehicle. So we change the oil every 3,000 miles, or we can swap the engine every 30,000. Far more cost effective to do the maintenance on the asset. And there's a right time and place to do rehabs, and we certainly want to target roads before they drop off that cliff, so to speak. So that target rehabs zone that I'm showing there in that second graph is a PCI range of about a 60 up to an 85. So pavement management is really a balance of tackling the backlog, the roads that are in bad condition, while also maintaining the roads that are in good condition that represent the fabric of the city's road network. Now, the concept of pavement management is really built around three specific ingredients. The first is the network condition. It's understanding the network condition. We can't plan a course forward until we know where we are today. So it's understanding the condition. It's rolling in city-specific priorities, industry standard analysis techniques, and city-specific reporting methodologies. But we also want to roll in a third ingredient, which is city-specific objectives, level of service policies, and certainly existing budgets that the city has planned moving forward. So some tools that we use to rate the streets. This is the laser road surface tester that was mobilized to the city. Its job was to survey every segment of road that is maintained by the city. And it has a series of high-speed lasers, HD cameras, and GPS technology. So it drove every segment of road, assessing the cracking of the roads, the rutting of the roads, the roughness, the shattered slabs, the potholes, you name it. It was gathering a full suite of pavement distress data that we could then analyze. And again, if we look a bit deeper on the PCI scale, this is a typical pavement deterioration curve that you see there in that red line. And there's a right time to apply a right rehab to any particular road. We can see the very good roads are roads that score a PCI of 70, upwards of 85. These are roads that, for the asphalt roads, are good candidates for surface treatments. Something along the lines of a microsurface or a slurry seal or even a chip seal. On the concrete roads, these are good candidates for some localized remove and replace, some crack sealing, and some joint sealing. But if we jump further down the list, we'll take a look at the poor roads. These are the roads that land between a PCI of 25 and upwards of a 40. On the asphalt roads, these are the roads that require some sort of thick overlay or partial reconstruction for their rehab. And on the concrete roads, these are roads that need something more extensive in terms of panel replacement, meaning 15% or more of the panels along this route need to be replaced. So there's a right time to apply a rehab to any given road based on its condition. So we've talked about PCI. Here's what PCI looks like. These are the very poor roads between a 0 and 25, just two examples. These are roads that are exhibiting base and structural failures, a lot of rutting and excessive cracking. These roads are far past the point of overlay-based rehabilitation. They need a full reconstruction as a part of their rehab. And the rehabs on these roads are often driven by citizen complaints as well. Safety does become a concern at a very low PCI. As soon as PCI drops below 10, that's where we start seeing distortions forming in the road and potholes forming on a regular basis as well. If we take a look at the poor to marginal roads, these are roads that score between a 25 and a 50 on the PCI scale. These are roads that have localized base failures, rutting at intersections, extensive cracking, and a lot of patching. These are simply tired streets that are due that are certainly due for a thicker overlay, possibly a surface removal and replacement on the asphalt roads, and extensive panel replacements on the concrete roads. These are a high priority to avoid reconstruction. We can save dollars today by capturing critical poor to marginal roads rather than letting them fall into a full reconstruction rehab process. If we take a look at the roads, the fair roads between a PCI of 50 and 60, these are the roads that do have progressive cracking, but they have fewer base failures and certainly localized distresses. These roads are an optimum timing for a thin to moderate overlay or even a moderate panel replacement on the concrete routes. And there's a lot of benefits to selecting these routes, as there's an early lower cost, as we're using thinner strategies and less materials. There's a greater return that results in less grinding to the streets and less work to be done on the drainage. If we look at the good roads between a 60 and a 70, these roads have few localized distresses and minimal base failures. These roads are good candidates for slight panel replacements on the concrete routes. And certainly on the asphalt routes, these are good candidates for surface treatments. Now, if we notice a road in this category on an asphalt road that's exhibiting load-associated distresses, things like alligator cracking and rutting and potholes, those are caused by the loading of traffic. If we notice that is the case, we apply a heavier rehab, such as a thin overlay, as opposed to a surface treatment. The very good roads, these are the roads that score between a 70 and 85. Very few distresses, no rutting, no base failures. These roads are good candidates for some crack seal and a surface treatment on the asphalt roads. and certainly a joint reseal and localized rehab on the concrete routes. These roads maintain the existing drainage when we apply these rehabs, and they extend the pavement life at the lowest cost. They have the highest cost benefit. And the excellent roads, these are the roads that score between an 85 and 100. They're in like-new condition. There's very few minor distresses, smooth ride, they have good drainage. These roads should provide a solid 5 to 10 years prior to the first rehabilitation with some routine maintenance. So we've talked about PCI. This is what the data looks like. This is a PCI distribution chart. So on the x-axis, we have PCI in groups of 10, and on the y-axis, we have the percentage of network by area. I just realized I had a pointer. Now that makes me dangerous. And so what this tells us, this can tell us a lot about an agency, and especially how it trends. So you can see I plotted that blue line there to show us what a typical distribution looks like. Now the good news is Broken Arrow is in good condition in terms of our streets. We can see that we have low backlog. That would be that left-hand tail there on that particular chart. And we have a high presence of streets between a 70 and a 90. We even exceed the norm with some of those streets as well. So it tells us right off the bat the city is trending a little bit better than we traditionally see. Now we take this same graph and we actually group the PCI scores into descriptive terms. The very same terms that we just reviewed in some of the imagery from very poor to excellent. Now there's 3 metrics that we use to assess the health of any given agency. The first metric is the average PCI score. Nationally right now we're seeing an average score between a 60 and a 65. And Broken Arrow is scoring a 70, which is a highly coveted score. A lot of agencies are struggling to get in the 70s, and it's a highly desirable place to be. So you're doing well there, and you get a check mark on the first metric. The second is backlog. Your backlog is at 4%, and I mentioned earlier, that's a phenomenal number. It's an excellent number. A very financially healthy city will have less than 10% of their backlog, or less than 10% of their network, fall into backlog. 12 to 15% is considered manageable so long as we check backlog and we arrest growth. As an agency starts approaching 20% backlog, things can spiral and effectively snowball out of control very quickly, meaning the big ticket expensive work piles up so fast that we can't get our hands on enough capital to catch up. Broken Arrow is nowhere close to that number. You're in a very healthy position in backlog. The second, or I should say the third metric we look at is the percent of excellent roads. These are the roads that score above a PCI score of 85. Generally, we like to see a minimum of 15%, and Broken Arrow met that metric as well, right at 15%. The reason this is a metric is because it tells us if the city has been reinvesting in the network somewhere close to the steady state requirement. And the steady state requirement is simply the funds needed to maintain the status quo in the city, maintain the existing condition of the road network. This next slide, you can see a graphical plot of the road conditions there. Green is good, red is bad, yellow is somewhere in between, kind of organized it like a stoplight there. There's a lot of green up there. Again, network PCI is 70, backlog 4%. We would certainly suggest a target PCI greater than or equal to 70. You're in a great position. Let's hold that position or improve. And we would suggest a backlog of reconstruction less than or equal to 5%. We also did a street sign inventory for you folks as well. So the van was equipped with HD imagery that we can use to post-process and do an inventory of all of your street signs. And we did that as a part of this assignment. Every single one of those red dots that you see there on that image is a sign that you folks own and maintain. And there's all different types of signs. There's stop signs, there's street signs, there's yield signs, there's bus parking signs, many different types. In total, we inventoried 17,500 signs that the city maintains. So not only is the road network a big asset and investment, so were the signs in the right-of-way as well. So let's talk about the analysis methodology that we use. We have all of this condition data. We've taken a look at the PCI score. Now we need to analyze it and come up with a 5-year rehab plan. First of all, we understand funding is not $0, nor is it unlimited. If we had unlimited funds, that would make pavement management very easy. We also understand the city places a value on its road network, all functional classes, arterial roads, collectors, and local roadways. We want to identify the annual budget that maintains the current PCI as well as backlog. Those often are not the same number. We want to examine the effects of your current funding levels. We certainly want to prevent deterioration in pavement quality. And then a few notes on some of the budget numbers that I'm going to show you. ADA compliance is not included in these numbers. So ADA ramp repairs, sidewalk repairs, not included in these estimates. There's no inflation in the estimates. And pavement management is priority-based. It's not worst first. So we don't simply line up the roads according to PCI and start at the bottom. That's swapping the engine every 30,000 miles rather than doing the routine maintenance. So the first thing we do before we jump into the analysis is we do a couple life cycle estimates. These are fairly textbook estimates in our industry that are done well before we get into the analysis results. So these are not the final numbers, but they help us validate the final numbers and certainly fine-tune them. The first estimate you see is simply based on the network value. So that $500 million there, divided by each pavement type's theoretical life from new to dust. That gives us a number of roughly $9.5 million annually that needs to be spent on the network. Now this doesn't take into account condition, it simply takes into account the value of the network. So it's not a bulletproof number per se, but it starts setting the tone of what ballpark we need to be in. The second estimate that we do is based on the average condition of each pavement type. We then apply an average treatment to the number of miles that fall in that category, and we can come up with an estimated annual need of about $8.3 million. So we're starting to add a little bit more information to each life cycle estimate. The last life cycle estimate that we do before we get into the analysis is based on the city's total deficit. Meaning if someone wrote the city a blank check to go out and fix all roads in like-new condition, what would that number be? That number is just shy of $85 million to fix everything in like-new condition. Based on that, we can calculate an estimated annual need of about $6 million annually to maintain current conditions. So typical life cycle estimates show that we need roughly $6 million a year to maintain PCI. Now we get into the analysis. Those are just the funding estimates that we do well before we get into the analysis results. What you're seeing here is a result of the final analysis routines that were a part of the city's new pavement management program that we configured. What you see here, this steady state, this red, well, let me explain this graph here real quick too. On the x-axis, this is the annual budget over a 5-year horizon. And on the y-axis, we have plotted the post-rehab PCI, meaning what happens to the average network PCI score given several different funding scenarios. This red line here represents the city's steady state PCI budget, meaning if we just wanted to maintain a PCI of 70, we would need an annual investment of roughly $4.4 million every year to maintain our ground today. This green line here represents the city's existing budget. So it represents the city's existing budget plus the committed bond work from the 2011 and the 2014 bonds. So we can see here with the existing bonds that we have committed and the current funds, over a 5-year horizon, PCI is actually going to increase from a 70 to a 73. Backlog is going to drop from 4% to 2%. So we're in an even healthier position now with the existing funds that we have programmed into the system. The next graph is a similar budget graph. On this one, what I've done is I've plotted here. This is each year for the next 5 years, and we have its effect on PCI here on the y-axis. And we've plotted several budget scenarios. So this line on top that skyrockets towards the ceiling, that's that fix-all number. That's that $85 million to fix everything in like-new condition. The bottom line is the do-nothing scenario. So we can see if we do nothing and spend $0 over the next 5 years, PCI will drop from a 70 to roughly a 62 in as little as 5 years. So pavement deteriorates rather quickly. This red line here is your steady state. That's that $4.4 million to maintain the city's existing PCI, and the green line is the committed funds and budgets that we have available. Now, when we talk about rehab needs and selecting specific streets for rehab, how do we do that? This graph here, it's a little complicated looking, but I'm going to simplify it. What we've done is we've plotted PCI here on the x-axis, and every red dot that you see there is a segment of road surveyed here in Broken Arrow. And every box represents a rehab activity that can be done to each road based on its current condition. Now, in terms of prioritization, the arterials have the highest priority, followed by the collectors, and then followed by the locals. That's fairly textbook pavement management. But the order of rehab selection is based on the cost of deferral. So for example, if a street requiring a thick overlay is deferred, the incremental cost is about 100% because it drops into a partial reconstruction category. The cost is exponential. But if a street slips from a thin overlay to a moderate overlay, the penalty is only about 25%. So when we're working with limited funds, we want to optimize the rehab plan as much as possible by using a cost-benefit approach. And in terms of some final recommendations, we would certainly recommend the city maintain the PCI at or above a 70 with backlog below 5% for the entire roadway network. Using a budget of $6.75 million, which takes into account the committed bond work, will result in a network PCI of 73 and backlog under 2% over the next 5 years. We'd certainly recommend the use of a full suite of rehab strategies that are reviewed on an annual basis. Costs can change dramatically in materials, so those need to be updated annually. Steady, effective rehab and maintenance on an annual basis does save the city money over deferred maintenance in the long run. And certainly the city should resurvey their streets every few years to update the condition data, the rehab program, and the models that are run within the pavement management system. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions. Those are not Broken Arrow roads, by the way.
Any questions?
So under this program, all the roads are we maintaining over this $85 million or whatever that number was, at $6 million a year, we're able to maintain all our roads in their current condition, or we're continuing to upgrade them to the condition they need to be in?
Excellent question. You're actually improving. So with the existing funds of $6.75 million annually, that includes the bond work, you're improving your network average PCI from a 70 to a 73, and you're cutting your backlog in half. So it's going from 4% down to 2% additionally. So you are certainly improving conditions.
So I guess how many of those lower level roads are we bringing out of those levels and moving them up?
I don't have that list in front of me. We can definitely get that question answered for you.
Okay.
Does your analysis take into account when the bond money is no longer there, or if it aren't there?
No. So this analysis takes into account, this is a 5-year horizon. So all of the models and all of the budget scenarios are based on 5 years, and they're based on the budgets that the city has committed for the next 5 years. So anything after that 5-year horizon is not modeled yet here in the pavement management system.
Councilman, just to let you know, is that it was discussed last year that, now that we got the vision tax repurposed, and that will generate just over anticipated $3 million, is that as a part of the next general obligation bond package we put before voters, there would be some consideration of roads to be added. Hopefully the voters would approve that we could add to that $3 million. And now having the PCI report, we can actually look at those, the condition of those roads, and make determinations on which roads to be done that would give us the best opportunity to keep that PCI rating high. And that was something the council will ultimately decide when we present something to you later next year.
Let me make sure I understand this on the roads. So if the road is a bad road, it could get a little bit worse, but there is a better road that wouldn't cost as much to rehabilitate it. We're going to spend money on the better road and let the other one go ahead and deteriorate, because it's going to have to go down anyway to the point that we've got to replace all of it.
That very well could be.
And we still have citizens that live on that road.
That very well could be. There's always going to be backlog, so there's always going to be bad roads. At 4%, that's an extremely low number. Most cities are in the 10 to 12% range right now, so 4% is very healthy. There's always going to be bad roads. At some point, they have to be rehabilitated. But if those roads are very early on in their life cycle and they can be deferred in favor of capturing other streets, that may be the right decision, maybe the right financial decision.
Councilman Parks, I can tell you is that Zach said early on that, you don't always have to go right by what the scores are. That's why when we do the budget and we talk about the roads that are going to be done, this tool is going to become part of the budget process to let the council members know what we plan our recommendations are. Then you as the governing body get to ultimately weigh in on the work that needs to be done as well.
Because I imagine if you live on a bad road, you aren't as excited about it.
And
Well, you want to keep your score very high. However, there's a lot of factors that go into those decisions on which one of those roads that are at the lowest end on when they get done.
But this doesn't preclude us from going in.
It does
We're
not.
still going to fix potholes.
Absolutely.
And all those other issues. It's just if the road needs to be totally rehabbed, it may be 5 years instead of 4 years.
But it is tougher on some of their cars in this situation. So I agree with what you're saying. I don't disagree with it at all. I'm just saying there's other things I think that we need to look at. And I think that's what the city manager
That's correct, sir.
is saying. So if the citizens are, you know what I mean, if it's tearing up their car, if they're having lots of problems with it, and it's one that we need to let go another 4 or 5 years until it's really bad, that could be a pretty tough situation. And I don't want to say a political decision there, but it could be, hard for the citizens to understand why the money's going to fix a good road when their road is falling apart.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
That's why Zach doesn't have to make those decisions. We do.
Yes, I do have the added benefit of not making those decisions. One thing that we have to remember, though, too, is that the pavement management system really represents a bowl of marbles. As we push another marble into it, another one pops up. So we certainly can modify the pavement management plan, and it needs to become your own as well. Just recognize that as we program in other work will fall out as well.
Well, I think the optimistic thing that she's showing in this is that with the investment that we're going to make is we're going from 4% down to 2% of a backlog of bad roads. So it's getting better and better, which making that effort. And this is a good tool for us to analyze what we do need to work on, and then we can have those discussions of what the priorities need to be.
I think it definitely goes to show the citizens they were wise to make this investment and so that we can keep that number dropping.
Well,
reducing the amount of backlog.
Let me add this to what you said, Councilman. That's a good point, is that by having this report, whenever we go ask the voters for support of general bond obligations, you now have a report that scientifically you have the data that demonstrates the condition of our roads and the importance of maintaining those roads at a certain level, and that we need a little over $6 million a year to be able to keep our roads in that 70 range that Zach talked about. So it really helps us provide the education on the importance of supporting those propositions to couple that money with what we're getting through the repurposed sales tax to be able to have the funds we need to stay at or improve above the 70.
I do think it's commendable that we're in that 70 and 73 when you look at the national average, and I'm sure there's some other cities in our metro that aren't even in the 60 range. So we're really, I think, doing a very good job with our roads.
And I think the key is that having a game plan of
Yes.
how we're going to fix that.
Absolutely.
I like having a road map, unintended.
Well, as I mentioned, when we present the budget, there will be a recommendation from the administration on what roads we're going to be completing, and the council will have the final say-so, and you'll have the report, and so we can have that discussion, exactly our methodology and which roads we selected, and then ultimately the council will decide.
Have any more questions or comments? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good job.